for a long time, when the media gets upset about violence in video games, or when researchers do studies on violence in video games, what they really pay attention to is the content of the game. They really pay attention to what the game shows you, what the game allows you to do, and what you see in the game. But I'm trying to argue that the content of the game isn't what makes it good, bad, right, or wrong. It's rather, what is it that motivates you, the player, to want to engage with that content?
The big question, and we're going to get into specifics of this, of course, but the big question I wanted to kind of tee things off is it morally wrong to commit acts of violence in a video game? And if it is wrong, what makes it wrong? When is it wrong?
Yeah. Yep, that's the big question. I didn't actually answer your question about World of Warcraft, whether the Serenity Now raid was right or wrong, because I think that's an open question. That's a tough one. The part of what makes the World of Warcraft question a really hard one is that it's a player versus player game. It's a multiplayer game. There is no referee. People seem to be following the rules of the game. So, there's an open question. With the big question that you just asked, is it ever morally wrong to do something violent or bad in a game? I think it's really interesting to focus instead on multiplayer, player versus player violence, to just focus on single player games where like if I'm playing Red Dead Redemption at home by myself, I literally cannot be hurting anybody. I have no duties to my competitors. There are no other human beings at the other end of the avatars that I could possibly have any kind of responsibility to. So in that case, what would be wrong with me going on a killing spree or doing whatever I like in Red Dead Redemption? Yeah, that's the question that I really get excited about.
Yeah, the entire premise of focusing not on the act, but on how you're playing the game, your desires, whether you're cultivating an immoral desire by continuing to do an act of violence over and over again, like what are your motivations behind the violence, really made me think back to my own experiences playing video games. And you even mentioned one of them in the book before you even got to the section about Grand Theft Auto, where you're just going through the streets, rampaging, shooting people who are innocent, running people over. That was immediately where my mind went to what's something that I did repeatedly where it didn't help me advance in the game at all. I just perceived it as fun. It was fun in that moment to have a game with what seemed like an unlimited map. You can go wherever you want. An old lady crossing the street with a shopping cart, you could just blow her head off and the cops chase you, and then you have to get away from the cops, and then you start over and you do it again. To me, that whole question that you posed in the book, and the way that it's our motivations and the desires itself and not the action, it really made me think about like, when did I cross the line? Did I cross the line into cultivating something that I shouldn't have? Was it just fun? Did I like getting chased by the police? Was I doing it so the cops would chase me? Was I doing it because I liked the way it looked on screen, where I'm like, oh, it's fun to kill people? I don't think I am someone that would enjoy the act of, killing someone in the real world. I hope I never am posed with that situation. But in virtual games, like, certainly that was something that was a rush. That was a cool aspect of the game. So it really was, there's no answer, I guess, to that question, but it's a fascinating thing to apply that to your own experience, to my own experience with violence.
I think there is an answer to that question, but I think I can't answer it. I think you have to answer it because you're the player. The debate over violence in video games for the past few decades, I think has been, part of what I'm trying to do with the book is that I think the debate over violence in video games for the past few decades has kind of focused on the wrong issues. For a long time, when the media gets upset about violence in video games, or when researchers do studies on violence in video games, what they really pay attention to is the content of the game. They really pay attention to what the game shows you, what the game allows you to do, and what you see in the game. But I'm trying to argue that the content of the game isn't what makes it good, bad, right, or wrong. It's rather, what is it that motivates you, the player, to want to engage with that content? I think there's a really important distinction between, setting aside on the one hand the content of what's in the game, and on the other hand, thinking about what is it that drives you to want to do those things in a game. In that case, there are innocent reasons to do violent, nasty things in games. And maybe there are also some reasons that are not innocent. Like if you're playing, there are lots of innocent reasons. Like if I'm playing a Red Dead Redemption and I want to go on a killing spree, part of it might be just I'm experimenting with the game as a piece of technology. I'm trying to figure out, would the game actually allow me to do this? Is that part of the game? If I jump off this cliff, is it really going to let me jump off the cliff? Is it really going to let me fall to my death? I just want to experiment with the physics of the game. I think that's perfectly innocent thing to do. It would also be an innocent thing to play a game and really throw yourself into the violence because what you're interested in is having a rich, complex aesthetic experience. In that case, it's not all that different from watching a movie like Goodfellas or watching, Breaking Bad. What I like about Breaking Bad is the complexity of the moral challenge of what's going on in the story. And, I have this rich aesthetic experience where I see what the bad guy is trying to do and I don't condone it, but I also hope he does better. Right.
Yeah. That's
another innocent reason why I might do bad things in a game. Or, or maybe I'm just trying to gross out my friends.
That's a perfectly valid reason as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think every gamer tries to do that at some point. You're trying to gross out your friends, and that's probably an immature reason, but I don't think it's morally suspicious. On the other hand, I do think that there are probably some motivations that are morally suspicious, that are just weird. Like, maybe that's a bad idea that you want to throw yourself that deeply into something that dark. I think that in some cases, where I'm motivated to do something bad in the game because I really desire that action, that doing something bad in the game kind of reinforces your desire for it. And the harm that you're doing isn't a harm to the world. It's not a harm to other people. It's not a harm that you can even be punished for. It's really just a harm to your own moral character. I'm making myself into a person that desires things that I probably shouldn't desire. So that's the broad version of it. An example I can give you is when Red Dead Redemption came out. That game is old now. I think it was 2010. I think I might have my dates wrong, but I'm thinking of the first Red Dead Redemption. So me and another professor in my department are both gamers. We play a bunch of games. And one day he told me that in Red Dead Redemption, one of the things that you can do is you could hog tie villagers and leave them on train tracks to just watch trains run them over. And of course, when he told me that, I ran home and had to try it. Right. Because, what I wanted to see is, does the game really do that? Would it really allow me to do that?
And you could perform your own trolley experiment in that game if you get enough people.
Yes. If I could find a split in the tracks. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting thing about that case is so there are innocent reasons to do bad things. There are innocent reasons to tie villagers to train tracks and watch trains run them over in Red Dead Redemption at least once. But if I did that, if I came onto your podcast and I said, hey, Zach, I had a great weekend. I spent the whole weekend playing Red Dead Redemption, and all I did was left as many villagers as I possibly could on the train tracks.
Yeah.
I think at that point, you'd probably think, well, that's weird. There's something up there.
You got up to go to the bathroom twice in 48 hours. And every moment you weren't peeing or shitting, you were tying villagers to the train tracks. That was my weekend.
They even make adult diapers for that, right?
There you go. Adult diapers. You get the Grubhub right to your door. You leave the door unlocked, have the guy come in. Yeah, that's it's an interesting scenario to think about. Like, in that situation, tying someone to the train tracks, when does it cross the line to making your own life worse, like cultivating a type of action that is going to create a worse off moral life for you?
Yeah. Yep. Let me give you a different weird thought experiment, because you tell me what you think about this. When I talk about this topic, I find it really interesting how different people respond to the topic based on where they come from. When I give lectures about this to like psychologists, they all look at me like, yeah, we already knew this. This is no big deal. On the other hand, when I talk to gamers about this topic, they get so hurt, they get so angry that I'm suggesting that maybe sometimes what you do in a game is not the coolest thing, right? And the common response is that it can't be wrong because it's fictional, right? There can't be anything wrong with what I'm doing because all I'm doing is changing pixels on a screen. So imagine this case instead. Imagine that you make a new friend, and your new friend invites you to hang out at his house. And your friend tells you, I'm a painter, by the way. I want you to check out my paintings. So you go to their house, and when you walk in the door, you notice that the room is just covered floor to ceiling with paintings that this person did, and they're all like really hyper-violent scenes. And, I don't think I would probably blink. I would probably flinch, but I don't think I would be that upset about it, because it's just blobs of paint on canvas. And maybe he's really into horror movies, and that's what that's the aesthetic that he's going for with his paintings. I would think, okay, that's interesting. On the other hand, if I walked into the room and the paintings were all like hyper-violent rape scenes, I would leave. I would think, no, there's something wrong there. Like, this guy is not the person I thought he was. That's kind of strange. If I walked into the house and the paintings were all like really racist, I would think, well, obviously you really believe this, right? I wouldn't think this is just fiction just because it's blobs of paint on a canvas. That somehow, because it's imaginary, morality doesn't matter anymore. Like, this is a moral free zone. I would think, no, you really probably believe that. You probably identify with those values, and that freaks me out. Last case, I walk into the guy's house and it's covered floor to ceilings with paintings of pedophilia. I would call the cops. At that point, I would think, no, this person has undoubtedly crossed a line, and at that point I would call the cops. But within those four scenarios, I don't know where the line is. If they're just hyper-violent, horror movie scenes, I wouldn't think you've crossed a line. When we get to, the most extreme, the pedophilia paintings, I'm absolutely sure that you've crossed a line. With the other two cases, if it's sexism or racism, I mean, I feel that crosses a line.
Yeah.
I think so, but I can imagine somebody arguing that, well, no, maybe he's just playing with an idea. That sounds kind of shallow and cheap to me, but I could imagine somebody trying to make the argument.